So, you want to know how to sell to UK trade show prospects? Well, this particular session we're going to cover the secrets to succeed in that process. So here's what you're going to learn. What you're going to learn is the stages of the sales funnel and which of those are the same whether you're in the UK or in the US. You're going to learn what you need to know to succeed in selling to UK companies, the things that you must do and also the things that you shouldn't do. So here's what you're going to need. What you're going to need is you're going to need prospects from a UK trade show. And that obviously sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people don't actually have that. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need to understand shift work or have an alarm clock, because bearing in mind that the UK is either 5 or 8 hours ahead, depending on whether you're east or west coast, the chances are that when you're picking up the phone at the beginning of the day, the person that you're contacting in the UK is at the end of the day. And you're going to need a sales script, and you're going to need some clearly defined objectives for that initial call that you're going to be making. So, what are the 7 steps to selling? This is kind of like the same regardless of whether you're in the UK or the US. It's just good as a bit of a refresher. So, first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to establish contact and rapport. You're going to need to qualify the prospect to make sure that they're actually a person that you should be talking to. You're going to establish your credibility, both personally and for the company that you work for. You're going to actually establish what their decision-making process is, because every company has a different decision-making process. And typically what you find, certainly in the UK, is that the people that actually attend the trade shows tend not to be quite so heavily involved in the decision-making process. And it's the same can be obviously said for most companies that send people along to the trade shows. They're not necessarily the people who will be doing the follow-up sales call. You need to understand what your sales interview and questioning process is going to be. Do the problem solving and presentation, and then go through any closing and objection handling that you might need to do. So here are the things that you need to know to succeed. First of all, you need to know, as I mentioned before, that the UK is actually in a different time zone, and it's 5 to 8 hours ahead. So if you look at it from the kind of like logical perspective, 9 o'clock in the morning in the UK is actually 4 o'clock in the morning in New York, or 1 o'clock in the morning in LA. So if you're going to be doing phone calls, trying to get hold of people before lunchtime, you're going to have to set that alarm clock quite early and make sure you're there. Alternatively, if you want to make your calls later in the day, say 5 o'clock in the afternoon UK time is noon in New York, or 9 o'clock in the morning in LA or San Francisco. So that's just something to kind of bear in mind, that quite often when you're looking to make phone calls, those people are looking to get out the door and head down to the pub. As I mentioned before, most trade show attendees are actually not the decision makers in the business. And the next thing to know is that British people really don't like to have hard salespeople calling them. So here are the things that you must do if you're looking to succeed in selling to UK companies. First of all, you need to establish that rapport. Bearing in mind that you're not the person who may have actually met them at the trade show, it's very important to try and establish rapport. And it probably sounds very cheesy, but most British people are quite happy to talk about what they did at the weekend, what the weather's like, that sort of thing. So if you can, maybe check to see what the weather's been like in London, try and find something, or wherever they're actually based in the country, try and find a reason to kind of like establish that rapport to sort of starting out. So sporting events, football, so follow teams like Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United. Try and understand a little bit about what's actually taking place in the UK before you actually make that call to establish that rapport. Next thing to do is to establish who the decision makers are actually in the company, and if you can, try and get those on the call at that point. And obviously, if you can't, then maybe make arrangements to have a follow-up call. So, as I mentioned before, it's important to call at the right time, and ideally, if you're looking to contact people in UK media, then before 10 o'clock in the morning or after 5 p.m. are usually the best time to take a hold of people. Once they actually get into their day, quite often they're actually on the phone themselves trying to make sales quota. The last thing they want to be doing is to be answering calls to salespeople. the next thing to do is to educate them on your proposition, and make sure that they actually understand what it is that you do. The one thing to kind of bear in mind is that certainly in the UK, the CPA affiliate marketing is a new thing. It's not something that most people will be aware of, and it's something to kind of bear that in mind when you're actually talking to people. You can't make the assumption that they'll actually know what you're talking about. So it's important to educate them. On the flip side of what the things that you must do, these are the things that you really shouldn't do. One of the things that people tend to find is that when somebody calls from America, they tend to talk loudly, they tend to talk fast, and quite often it's very apparent that the person is kind of walking around the office, maybe on a Bluetooth headset or something like that. So if you can, sit down, take your headset off, lower the kind of the volume on your voice, and try and slow down to make sure that the person actually understands every word that you're saying. The other thing to not to do is to assume that your company is the only one that they actually spoke to. Usually at these trade shows, there's a lot of companies that speak to people as they're going around. So the chances are that you're going to be one of many people following up. So it's important to try and establish that rapport and just make sure that don't make the assumption that you're the only person that they've spoken to. The next thing, this is quite important. It's a little bit like the getting the Goldilocks thing, just getting things just right. One of the things we tend to find is that because US people come to UK trade shows, they then have the trip home, which might mean that they're sort of a couple of days after the actual show finishes that they're getting home. And typically what tends to happen is that American companies will follow up on sales prospects too late. They'll call 2 weeks after the event, by which time if somebody's really, really in the market for the thing that you're proposing, then the chances are they've already found a vendor for that. Ideally, the best sort of time to call a prospect in the UK after a trade show, 3 to 6 days. That gives them a day, possibly 2 days to get back into the swing of things, get back into their routine. Maybe if they've been to the show, they can follow up on the people that they've been speaking to. Then they're in a position to talk to people that they're looking to potentially buy from. The last thing you kind of need to bear in mind is that British people don't really kind of go in for this whole waffle. They don't want people to just kind of like talk and talk and talk. They don't like idle chit chat. So try and remember the three famous Chinese salespeople: poo, foo, and who, i.e. phone up, fix up, and hang up. Okay, so the big differences, the fundamental differences between selling in the UK versus selling in the US is the speed of talking, the volume of talking. Typically in the UK, people tend to adopt more of a questioning approach, whereas in America, it tends to be more of a telling approach. Rather than, asking people questions, they just kind of tell them all about their products. The other thing to kind of bear in mind is that the majority of selling that goes on in the UK is actually face-to-face. So in some respects, it's a good thing that you're making phone calls, but in others, it's a bad thing because most people tend not to buy things over the phone. They tend to do it face-to-face. That's an important factor to kind of bear in mind. And also the other thing is that usually in the UK, most of the sort of sales process tends to be 2 or more visits or calls. So don't try and sort of pick up the phone up somebody and expect to kind of close them at that point in time. Yeah, there's every likelihood that there will need to be at least one, possibly even more